Welcome to the Pathways Podcast, an experimental show designed to explore new pathways to student success in higher education. I'm Austin Hostetter, the Assistant Director of the Center for Professional Selling and a lecturer of marketing at Ball State University, and I'm your host for these first few episodes. As I mentioned in last week's episode, I created this podcast with the hope of having conversations around the increasingly complex journeys many students take to complete their degrees. This week, I continue to explore these different pathways with my next discussion, this time focusing on high school students and their increasingly complex journeys to finding careers. This week, I'm chatting with Patrick Burris. Patrick is the Internship and Capstone Coordinator at Newcastle High School, a brand new position created by the school to help students with career and college coaching. Patrick joined Newcastle High School after an extensive career as the Assistant Site Director for the Ivy Tech in Newcastle. From our conversation, you'll quickly be able to tell just how much passion Patrick has for helping students find success no matter what path they're on, whether they're in high school or at Ivy Tech, regardless of their situation. We discuss many of the programs he's worked on, as well as the students he's interacted with, and how well Indiana's existing education structures are helping them for a career after school. Here's our conversation. Well, Patrick, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me about this, and I want to spend part of this conversation talking about what you're currently doing in your new role, because it's a very unique role, and I think it's a pretty much brand new role that no one else really has in the state right now. But I want to first start with some background on what you were doing at Ivy Tech before you started this role. So can you just tell me a little bit about what you were doing at Ivy Tech, what your role was there, day to day, what you were doing?
Yeah, sure. So I actually had several different roles during my 5 years at Ivy Tech. So when I first start, it was kind of more of like a side project, honestly. I was teaching a few adjunct classes just for some extra money. I never thought to help put into some of the businesses that I was working with online. And I never really had considered myself in education, but after talking with some people, I thought I could maybe go in and teach some student life skills, maybe some business courses with some of my extra time. And when I went in there, I really found a passion for it. And I was really enjoying it, and enjoying working with the students, enjoying being in the classroom with them. And so I was doing that for about a year at the local Newcastle site. And after about a year, they came to me because there was a new opening that they had with the site growing related to academic advising and financial aid. Newcastle kind of being more of a satellite campus of the main Muncie campus. It was kind of a dual role where you would both do advising and financial aid. So I transitioned into that for a few years. And then my last 2 years there, I was actually the assistant site director for the Newcastle site. And really in my time there, I got to see a pretty comprehensive view of how the college ran, being in advising and teaching, in administration and management, and in the financial aid aspect. So I did a little bit of all of it, and it was a rewarding experience, and I really enjoyed my time there.
Yeah, you were definitely wearing a lot of hats, which what I'm learning from a lot of people that work at Ivy Tech or at other community colleges is that is common. That, once you get involved and once you really start to develop a passion for it, you will wear a lot of hats and do a lot of different things. Tell me a little bit about who some of the students you worked with were. What type of students were they, given that you were teaching and you were having experiences in the classroom with students, with the academic advising and all the different things you were doing. What were these students doing at Ivy Tech? What were some of the situations you were dealing with them? Who were these students you were interacting with every day?
Well, one of the things that's really unique about Ivy Tech, and I would think maybe a lot of community colleges as well, is just the diversity of the different students that you have. We have a lot of students, considerable percentage, that are coming straight out of high school and looking to maybe get a 2-year associate degree or some kind of certificate or technical certificate for a trade to where they can go to the workforce more quickly. We have a significant number of students that come out of high school now to maybe get a year or two of their general education courses done and then go on to a 4-year, because now Ivy Tech has so many partnerships with 4-year state schools that they can take a lot of these classes at a lower cost in a lower in like a smaller classroom setting, kind of get used to college, and then still transfer on and get that bachelor degree. So we had a lot of students right out of high school, but then we have a lot of students, and a lot of our demographic are people that may be coming back to school later in life. Maybe they graduated and didn't think that college was for them at the time, or maybe they've transitioned into a new area or a new line of work as the world's changed. So we had a lot of people coming in at all ages, had a lot of people that maybe had families, a lot of people that were in a transition stage of their life. So I had a lot of really great conversations with people that, with the Ivy Tech model, with the community college model, it gave them that flexibility. So maybe you have a single mother who can only afford with her time to do 1 or 2 classes right now. So at Ivy Tech, we have full-time students, we have part-time students, we had students that would take just 1 class at a time. Obviously, they've also moved to a newer model where there's 8-week classes as opposed to the full 16 weeks. So people can really start classes pretty much throughout the year. Every 8 weeks, there's a new class or a new group of classes starting. They have online options, obviously, as a lot of colleges do. But then with COVID, another thing that kind of changed was they moved to not only do you have in-person, online, virtual classes, but then they also have a model called Learn Anywhere, which was kind of nice for a lot of students because you could come to class, but at the same time, it was always going to be live streamed. So you could choose 1 week to come into class if you were having trouble, if there was something you really weren't understanding. But then on another week, if you had a family commitment or if you had a work commitment, the lecture was going to be streamed and recorded for you as well. So
That's a nice setup.
Yeah. So there's just a lot of flexibility in the offerings. And I think one of the reasons that was because our demographics were so broad. We had with people from different age groups, different family dynamics, people with different work dynamics, and so it really kind of helps to bring all those aspects into the realm.
Yeah, and talking about kind of the diversity there, obviously, you know, students that are maybe coming back at a later point in life or taking a more non-traditional route to education, they're kind of finding their path to Ivy Tech. I want to get to what you're currently doing in your current role, but just very quickly, are you getting the sense that more and more high schoolers are looking at community college as either kind of their next step out of high school for something like an associate's degree, or even just more as that stepping stone into a 4-year degree? Reason I bring that up, I had a conversation with our good friend Chris Wilkie last week, and we just sort of talked about how when we were in school, that didn't seem to be quite as, at least we didn't necessarily have the knowledge to do that. Maybe that wasn't necessarily an option for us, or an option that we were aware of. Do you feel like more and more high school students are taking that path, or at least considering that path?
Oh, without a doubt. At Newcastle, where I'm at now, Newcastle High School, which is where I graduated from high school. So when I graduated from Newcastle in 2009, there were 3 AP courses offered. And so at the end of the year, if you sat through those courses, you had to sit down, take the test. Hopefully you passed. If you passed, you got credit. So I graduated with, I believe, 9 college credits, and I was ecstatic about that. And now you fast forward, and even in a smaller town like Newcastle, we have over 20 dual credit courses offered in the building through either Ivy Tech or
Wow.
Vincennes, mostly Ivy Tech. Some of the Career Center have some Vincennes programs as well. And so last year, in my first year back at Newcastle, we had 7 seniors that graduated with their full associate degrees.
Wow.
So they graduated high school with 2 full years of college done, completed, paid for, all their gen eds. And we had over 30 students that graduated with their Indiana College Core. And so if people aren't aware of what the College Core is, basically Ivy Tech through state legislature has an agreement with all public state schools that if you complete this 30 credit hour core of different general education courses, that the public schools like a Ball State, IU, Purdue, that they have to accept those 30 credits in bulk. And it basically acts as if it's your freshman year. It's a little trickier with out of state and some private schools, but
Sure.
we see a lot of them accept the vast majority, to be honest. You know, there are some outliers, but we had over 30 last year, and that number is going to continue to grow as we offer more and more dual credit options. So just in in the 15 years since I've been there, it's just grown exponentially. And because of those Ivy Tech, and because Ivy Tech is in the school and they can take those classes, and Ivy Tech now offers, even in the summer, some free classes for students to take if they're close to completing the credential, a free class. I think a lot of students are considering Ivy Tech more. And a lot of students I've also seen definitely a trend in the 5 years that I was at Ivy Tech, and in the trend that I am seeing as I talk with students at Newcastle now, there's definitely been a trend back more towards a lot of the skilled trades.
For sure.
People are really realizing that we're going to have a shortage of electricians and plumbers and welders and advanced manufacturing and supply chain. Those types of things are in demand, and they're high wage jobs. And when I was first at Ivy Tech, I couldn't talk certain students into considering those types of trades. And now that's what a lot of them want to discuss, and that's what a lot of them want to talk about. So I think that's really helped Ivy Tech as well. And yeah, I think there's just a lot of people that are going to start trending toward the more of the community colleges and the non-traditional pathways to school, especially now. And that also opens, not only does it save them a lot of money, but then it does open up other opportunities for those that do go to the 4-year. Maybe that allows you to get to your master's quicker. Maybe that allows you to travel abroad and go overseas. Maybe that allows you to pick up an internship. So even for those people that they do have the plans, if they're going on for 4 or 6 years, to get their bachelor's or master's, it still kind of puts them ahead of the game. So, and yes, without a doubt that people are starting to see that, and I think it's a real trend.
That's crazy that many students at Newcastle are graduating with that many credits or that far along. But that's awesome. So let's talk about your current role
Okay.
because it is something new. It's, correct me if I'm wrong, it is very much an experimental role. And
Yes.
and
Yep.
you're kind of the first one in the state to be doing it. So tell me a little bit more about what you're doing and kind of how this role came into existence.
So last year, um, like I had said before, I had been at Ivy Tech for 5 years, and I was really happy at Ivy Tech. But an opportunity opened up at Newcastle High School, and there's always kind of something special about going, quote unquote, home,
For sure.
and going back to give to something that helped to form you. And so it was an opportunity to be a career and college coach, a grant funded position. That was going to be for 3 years, but it just something was really enticing about it. So I applied for the job, and for the first semester, we had a lot of field trips to colleges, worked with a lot of seniors, kind of coaching them on the college and job application process. And then about Thanksgiving last year, so almost exactly a year ago, the administration came to me, and there were several seniors that really had met all of their graduation requirements, and they were just kind of taking filler classes, or didn't have classes to take at all. And they were hoping that maybe we could find some work-based learning or some internship opportunities for this handful of students. I think we had about 6 to 8 that we were looking to place. And you kind of looked at the calendar, it's like, oh man, it's Thanksgiving, and they're going to be starting here in January. We've only got a few weeks to get these students and try to find something potentially meaningful for them. Well, we ended up placing 15 in a few weeks. So the community really stepped up, the students stepped up, and it just was a really, really great experience, really rewarding. The community really bought in, a lot of businesses, really quality group of students, and then we just saw a lot of really great outcomes in a very short time. And so we decided to transition this to a full-time position. So now I am an internship and capstone coordinator. So basically what my full-time job is now at Newcastle is trying to find seniors and a number of juniors internship opportunities throughout central Indiana for high schoolers. Now that Newcastle and a lot of schools have started to build in miniature pathways, so there's like course sequences for like a student that might want to complete a human services pathway or an advanced manufacturing pathway. Those internships can be considered capstones, or they can be considered just standalone work-based learning experiences. So right now we are at 50 students. So in less than a year, getting this started, we're up to 50 students that are placed in different areas around Henry County or even central Indiana. A good number of them are paid. Some of them are earning credentials. The students get to get out and kind of get that. Because what we hear from a lot of employers is not necessarily that the students don't have the knowledge to do the specific work. A lot of it is the practice of those soft skills and those employability skills.
It's exactly what we hear in the sales center as well. It's the stuff that isn't easily taught in a classroom. It's what you have to kind of go experience in many ways.
Right. How do you deal with the customer? How do you communicate? How do you work on a team? How do you handle X, Y, and Z in a real life scenario? And so I think a lot of that is even more valuable than what they may be learning specifically related to the job, or more of the technical skills.
For sure.
I think are those soft skills. So that was kind of our first and primary purpose behind this, was to get that practice. And then it's just kind of become bigger and bigger. And I think we could have maybe over 60 interns for the spring semester. And I've got now, freshmen and sophomores coming to me already wanting to discuss what their internship's going to be during their senior year. And it's like, okay, let's get you through Algebra 1 first.
Sure.
Before we start looking at things like that. But it's really exciting. And if you think about it, at first I was trying to do a sales pitch. Now I don't have to do a sales pitch because people have seen other students and they've seen their peers, what they're doing with it. But if you're a senior or a junior and you have 3 or 4, even 5 periods open, and you can sit through 3 or 4 classes that you don't need for graduation and have homework every night and have to sit in the school, or you can go out in the community during the day, have a little bit of freedom, get to go out for lunch, work in the community, get to build connections, looks great on a resume, looks great for scholarships. I think a lot of students see it as kind of a no-brainer, especially if they get a good matchup. And another nice thing we like to do is I tell a lot of them, maybe you'll hate it. And if you hate your internship for the right reasons, that's a positive too, because maybe you go out and in 9 weeks you learn, I don't want to be a social worker, I want to do this. And you didn't go to school for 2 or 4 years to find out that it's something you don't enjoy. You can find that out in a short grading period. So I've had students that they find exactly what they want to do. They love it. It reinforces that. And I've had students that have came to me saying, this is not for me, I don't enjoy this. And then we rotate them to something different at the semester or even at the 9 weeks. And I've had some students that have found a second or third choice of something that they hadn't considered before that they find really exciting now. And so to me, that's almost as rewarding as someone that reaffirms, is if you can save somebody that time. Because a lot of them are going to change their minds once they get into college anyway. So this just kind of moves that timeline up a little bit.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we push internships at the collegiate level so heavily is for the exact same reasons, to help develop those soft skills and also to help a student see whether or not they are actually passionate about what they're studying or whether or not they want to go in a different direction. Issue being that oftentimes those don't typically happen until junior year of college. And so at that point,
Hmm.
a course correction is a little more difficult. We're trying to make those experiences happen a little earlier in a student's college career, but if they're happening even at the high school level at senior year, that can be just as impactful. And just as a way to give students a little bit of exposure to some of this to help them make some more informed decisions. We at the Center for Professional Selling we're in our second year now, hosting interns as part of this program. It's been a great experience. We've had some wonderful students participate. They've gotten to sit in on some classes so they get an idea of what marketing and sales classes are going to be like. All these students have been, most of these students, I should say, there has been one exception, have been committed to come to Ball State already. And we've also been able to do a lot of great project work with them as they help out, plan events and help us do things in the sales center. So, great program. Really excited to see what you're doing with it. So this is sort of an extension of a question I asked a little earlier, but now kind of having the background of what you're doing at Newcastle High and the program that you're putting together and the experiences students are getting. What do you think about kind of the new pathways that seem to be opening up for, well, specifically for students at Newcastle? We talked about, you know, getting credit through Ivy Tech and possibly even going there to knock out some credits or getting an associate's degree or a technical degree. Students are getting work experience in senior year so they can start to think through the types of careers they might want to go into, whether they're going to a 4-year degree or whether they're going to just head into a trade after school. How do you feel about the opportunities students have at Newcastle, given all of that, and kind of how community colleges play into that? Do you see things trending positively here for students, or do you think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to kind of open up new pathways for them?
I don't think there's ever been a time where education at the high school level is more individualized. Um, Literally, almost every single student has their own, and I mean it's always been that way to an extent, but typically there's 30 classes offered and you have a certain sequence of classes that you have to take to get to graduation, and you move along with your peers, and you go from class X to Y to Z and you have to meet these requirements, blah blah blah. But it really is so individualized now. Like I said, there were 3 AP classes when I was at Newcastle 15 years ago. Now there's about 5 AP, 20 something dual credit courses, college cores, associates being completed. And so and now there's all these pathways, like you said. We've probably got about a dozen different pathways of different course sequences that you can take that can end in a capstone. And the nice thing is, if someone starts on a sequence of human services and takes a few classes during their sophomore year and realize that's not for them, then maybe they can move to a business pathway their junior year and start on that sequence. So I don't think there's ever been a time where it's more individualized, which causes there's more options, and with more options, there's obviously more work, and there's obviously more responsibility to the students as well. Do I think sometimes there can be so much it can be a bit overwhelming? Yes, I definitely agree with that sometimes you don't want to get to the point where you have so many options that it waters any one thing down. But I do think that it's great to get, more choices, as long as they're solid choices and they're built properly, I think are always positives. And so I think a lot of those decisions that students were having to struggle with and make as freshmen, and then, I changed my major in my junior year, and I know, gosh, I don't know how many people I know that after a year or two in college were making changes and changing decisions.
Yeah, I was
I
one of
think
them.
I think with a lot of this career exploration programs and focusing more on the employability skills and having these options to be able to move around and try different things that are more outside the box. I think that's a positive trend, and hopefully people can find their passions quicker, or even, like I said before, find the things that they don't like, which also kind of speeds up, saves money, and hopefully leads to better retention at the college level as well. Because, a lot of people, I feel like, lose a lot of people in that first year, or a good percentage at that first semester, because you get there and then you're a little bit lost. And I think a lot of that, some of that has to do with feeling overwhelmed, but some of it has to do with maturity, and some of that has to do, a number of different factors. But if you've already been kind of out in the quote unquote real world and dealing with people and having to communicate and had more experimental experiences, then maybe you have those skills to be able to stay in it when things get tough.
For sure. It's fascinating to hear about what you're doing. Looking forward to having more interns in the sales center in years to come, hopefully, if it continues to work out. But appreciate you taking the time to chat and do this with me. Thanks for agreeing to do it.
Oh, no problem.
Appreciate it. I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much.
If you want to hear more conversations, I'd encourage you to subscribe and stay tuned for future episodes. I'd also encourage you to seek out additional resources concerning community colleges in the state of Indiana and more broadly in our nation as a whole. Start to educate yourself on the opportunities that community colleges can offer all different types of students to begin to understand how community colleges can play a more important role in our larger higher education ecosystem. If you want to seek out some of these resources, you can check out the Pathways website, which will be linked in the description on this video. I'm Austin Hostetter. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation and look forward to chatting more with you soon.